The massive crystal throne room stretched out like a frozen ocean before Captain Tom Reed. His boots made soft clicking sounds on the polished floor as he walked between two rows of tall alien nobles. Each step echoed in the vast space above his head. The ceiling rose so high that he could barely see where it ended in the dim purple light. Tom kept his eyes forward and his back straight. He had been walking for almost 5 minutes just to reach the center of the room. The Velthani Empire liked to show their power through size and distance. Everything had to be bigger, taller, and more impressive than what other species could build. On both sides of the walkway, hundreds of Velthani courtiers watched him with curious eyes. Their skin had a pale blue tint that seemed to glow under the strange lighting. Most of them wore long flowing robes made from materials that shifted color as they moved. Some had jewelry that floated around their necks and wrists without any visible support. Tom wore his simple brown uniform with the Earth Fleet symbol on his shoulder. Next to all the fancy clothes and floating gems, he looked very plain. He could hear whispers in the Velthani language as he passed. Some of the words he understood were not very nice. "Look how small he is," said one voice. "His clothes are so simple," said another. "Do humans even bathe regularly?" asked a third voice, followed by quiet laughter. Tom did not turn his head or change his expression. He had heard worse things during his 20 years of space travel. Words could not hurt him, and he had more important things to worry about than alien opinions of human hygiene. At the far end of the room sat the crystal throne. It looked like it had been carved from a single piece of clear blue stone that seemed to have its own inner light. The throne was 3 times larger than any chair a human would need. It made the person sitting in it look more powerful and important. Queen Zara of the Velthani Empire sat on that throne with perfect posture. She was young by human standards, only 26 years old, but her species aged differently. Velthani reached full mental development by age 15 and were considered ancient by 50. At 26, she was in the prime of her life and had already ruled for 8 years. Her skin was paler than most of her people, almost white with just a hint of blue. Her hair was long and silver, braided with tiny crystals that caught the light when she moved her head. She wore a crown that seemed to be made of frozen starlight. Her dress was deep purple and covered with patterns that moved like living things across the fabric. Queen Zara was beautiful in the way that Velthani measured beauty. Her features were sharp and perfect, like a sculpture made by a master artist. Her eyes were large and completely silver, with no visible pupils. When she looked at someone, it felt like she could see right through them to their bones. Around the base of the throne stood her advisors and generals. Tom recognized some of them from his research. General Kex was a tall warrior with scars across his face from the border wars. Advisor Nim was known for her sharp mind and sharper tongue. Chancellor Voss controlled most of the Empire's trade routes and had enough money to buy small planets. All of them looked at Tom like he was an interesting but unimportant insect that had somehow learned to walk upright. Tom finally reached the center of the room and stopped exactly 10 feet from the throne. This was the traditional distance for foreign visitors. Any closer would be considered rude. Any farther would suggest fear or disrespect. He placed his right hand over his heart and gave a small bow. It was the human greeting that Earth Fleet taught all its captains. Simple, respectful, but not overly submissive. "Your Majesty," Tom said in clear, loud voice that carried across the huge room. "I am Captain Tom Reed of the Earth Fleet vessel Morning Star. I come with urgent information that affects the safety of your empire." Queen Zara tilted her head slightly to one side. Her silver eyes studied Tom's face for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had a musical quality that made even harsh words sound beautiful. "So," she said slowly, "the humans have finally decided to visit our court. We wondered when you would dare to approach a real civilization." Quiet laughter rippled through the crowd of courtiers. Tom kept his expression neutral and waited for permission to speak. He had studied Velthani customs for months before this trip. Interrupting the queen would end his mission before it began. "Tell us, little human, Queen Zara continued, what urgent information could your young species possibly have for an empire that has ruled the stars for 10,000 years? Tom reached into his jacket and pulled out a small crystal data device. It contained sensor readings, computer models, and scientific analysis from Earth's best minds. 3 months of travel through dangerous space routes to bring this information to her. Your Majesty, our long-range sensors have detected a massive dark matter storm moving toward this sector. It will reach your outer systems in approximately 6 days. The storm is unlike anything our scientists have seen before. It will disrupt all technology, destroy unshielded ships, and make entire planets uninhabitable for decades. He held up the crystal device. This contains all our data, including projected paths, intensity measurements, and suggested evacuation procedures for civilian populations. The room fell silent. Dark matter storms were not common, but everyone knew how dangerous they could be. A bad one could wipe out entire star systems and leave nothing but dead space behind. General Keck stepped forward and spoke in a gruff voice. If such a storm exists, why have our own sensors not detected it? Tom looked at the general respectfully. Your sensor technology is much more advanced than ours in most ways, sir. But humans have developed specialized equipment for detecting dark matter disturbances. We had to, because our home system sits near an area of space where these storms are more common. Advisor Nim made a sound that might have been laughter or disgust. How convenient. The primitive species happens to be the only one who can detect this terrible danger. It does sound rather suspicious, added Chancellor Voss. Perhaps the humans are trying to trick us into owing them a debt. Tom felt a flash of frustration but kept it off his face. He had expected some skepticism, but this was important enough that personal pride should not matter. The data is freely given, he said calmly. We ask for nothing in return except that you take the threat seriously. The storm will also pass through human space, and we are already beginning evacuation procedures for our own colonies. Queen Zara leaned forward slightly in her throne. Her silver eyes seemed to grow brighter as she studied Tom's face. You expect us to believe that humans, who have barely learned to travel between stars properly, have detected something that our advanced science cannot see? The Queen's voice grew colder with each word. Your people are children who found some old toys and think they understand how the galaxy works. You have been in space for what, 200 years? We have been exploring the cosmos since before your species discovered fire. More laughter came from the crowd, louder this time. Tom heard someone say, arrogant babies, in the Velthani language. Another voice said, they probably made up this storm for attention. Tom tried once more. Your Majesty, I understand your doubts. But the data speaks for itself. Even if there is only a small chance that we are correct, surely the lives of your people are worth taking basic precautions. Queen Zara stood up from her throne. She was tall for a Velthani, almost 7 feet in height. Her crown caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the crystal walls. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the entire vast room. You dare to lecture us about protecting our people? Your species fights wars over patches of dirt on a single planet. You poison your own air and water for short-term profit. Half of your population lives in poverty while the other half wastes resources on meaningless luxuries. The Queen's voice grew more mocking with each sentence. And now you come here, to a civilization that has achieved peace and prosperity across 1,000 worlds, to warn us about dangers we supposedly cannot see for ourselves. She raised one hand and waved it dismissively. Perhaps you should return to your little ships and leave real galactic matters to actual civilizations. We have no need for warnings from a species that has not even learned to stop killing each other. The entire court erupted in laughter now. It was not polite amusement but cruel mocking laughter designed to humiliate and wound. Tom heard dozens of voices making comments about human stupidity, human arrogance, and human ignorance. General Keck spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Maybe they are hoping we will invite them to join our empire as servants. They clearly cannot manage their own affairs. Advisor Nim added her own comment. I hear that humans are actually quite useful as manual laborers. They breed quickly and do not require much food. Chancellor Voss nodded seriously. Though I understand they have emotional problems that make them unreliable. Too much anger and fear in their thinking. The laughter grew even louder. Tom could see some of the courtiers wiping tears from their eyes. Others were pointing at him and making gestures he did not understand but knew were not friendly. Through it all, Queen Zara stood tall and proud on the steps of her throne. Her beautiful face showed nothing but cold amusement as she watched Tom being mocked by her entire court. She made no move to stop the cruel laughter or defend the dignity of a guest who had traveled months to help her people. Tom stood perfectly still in the center of the vast room. He did not raise his voice to be heard over the laughter. He did not demand respect or threaten consequences. He did not point out that Queen Zara was younger than many humans and had never faced a real crisis in her short reign. Instead, Tom did something that no one in the room expected. He studied Queen Zara's face for a long, quiet moment. His brown eyes met her silver ones directly, without anger or fear or desperation. He looked at her the way someone might look at a stranger on a busy street, with polite disinterest. Then Tom placed the crystal data device carefully on the floor at his feet. He straightened up, put his hands at his sides, and gave the same small bow he had offered when he first arrived. "Thank you for your time, Your Majesty," he said in a normal tone of voice that somehow carried clearly through the laughter. Tom turned on his heel with military precision and began walking toward the exit. His boots made the same soft clicking sounds on the polished floor, but now they seemed much louder in the gradually quieting room. He did not look back. He did not ask permission to leave. He did not make any speeches about how they would regret treating him this way. He simply walked between the rows of suddenly confused nobles, heading for the massive doors at the far end of the throne room. The laughter died out completely as people tried to understand what they were seeing. In Velthani culture, being dismissed by royalty was a terrible shame. The proper response was to beg for forgiveness, offer gifts or services, or at least argue about the unfairness of the treatment. Walking away without a word was something that had never happened before in Queen Zara's court. No one knew what it meant or how they should react. Tom continued his steady walk toward the exit. The courtiers turned to watch him go, their colorful robes rustling as they moved. Some whispered questions to each other, but no one spoke loud enough for him to hear actual words. General Kex looked confused. Advisor Nim frowned as she tried to figure out what kind of trick this might be. Chancellor Voss glanced between Tom's departing figure and Queen Zara's face, trying to read the situation. Queen Zara herself had gone very still on her throne. Her silver eyes followed Tom's movement with an expression that might have been surprise, confusion, or something else entirely. As Tom reached the halfway point to the door, one young courtier called out in a mocking voice, "Running away so soon, human? Did our words hurt your feelings?" Tom neither slowed down nor looked in the direction of the voice. He kept walking at the same steady pace, his back straight and his head high. Another voice shouted, "What about your urgent warning? Are you giving up on saving us?" Still no response from Tom. His boots continued their rhythmic clicking across the crystal floor. By the time Tom reached the massive doors, the entire throne room had fallen into complete silence. Hundreds of aliens watched a single human walking away from their queen without saying a word. It should have looked like defeat or shame, but somehow it did not. The doors opened automatically as Tom approached. He stepped through them into the corridor beyond without pausing or looking back even once. The doors closed behind him with a soft sound that seemed very loud in the quiet room. For a long moment, nobody moved or spoke. Queen Zara still sat on her throne, staring at the closed doors where Tom had disappeared. Her perfect face showed no emotion, but her hands gripped the arms of her throne tightly enough to make her knuckles white. General Kex was the first to break the silence. "Your Majesty, should we send guards after him? He could be planning some kind of revenge." Queen Zara did not answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than before. No. Let him go. Advisor Nim stepped closer to the throne. The human left his data device, Your Majesty. Should we examine it? The Queen looked down at the small crystal lying on the floor where Tom had placed it. It seemed very small and unimportant in the vast room, but somehow it drew attention like it was the most significant thing there. Leave it, Queen Zara said softly. Chancellor Voss cleared his throat. Your Majesty, if I may ask, what do you think the human hoped to accomplish with that display? Queen Zara stood up slowly from her throne. She walked down the crystal steps until she reached the spot where Tom had stood. The data device lay at her feet, still glowing faintly with stored information. I do not know, she admitted. But I have never seen anything like it. She bent down and picked up the crystal device. It felt warm in her hand and seemed to pulse with its own light. The technology was clearly human-made, different from anything in her empire. Simpler in some ways, but also strangely elegant. Your Majesty, General Keck said carefully, surely you do not believe the humans' warnings about this supposed storm. Queen Zara turned the crystal device over in her hands. 3 months, she said quietly. Your Majesty. He traveled for 3 months to bring us this information. Through pirate-controlled space and past our border defenses. A human captain risked his life and his ship to warn people who are not his allies about a danger that will also threaten his own worlds. She looked up at her advisors. And when we mocked him for it, he simply walked away. Advisor Nim frowned. Surely that proves he was lying. If the threat was real, he would have argued more strongly. Or, Queen Zara said slowly, it proves that he told us the truth and has no more time to waste on people who will not listen. The Queen looked around her vast throne room, at the hundreds of courtiers in their beautiful clothes and floating jewelry. Everyone looked sophisticated and powerful and wise. But none of them had ever traveled 3 months through dangerous space to help strangers. Schedule a meeting with the Science Council, Queen Zara said finally. I want this data examined immediately. Chancellor Voss looked surprised. Your Majesty, you cannot seriously be considering dash. I am considering the possibility, Queen Zara interrupted, that a 26-year-old queen might have something to learn from a species she just called children. She walked back up the steps to her throne, still holding the crystal device. As she sat down, she looked once more at the doors where Tom had disappeared. For the first time in her 8-year reign, Queen Zara of the Velthani Empire wondered if she had just made a terrible mistake. 3 days passed in the Crystal Palace of the Velthani Empire. Queen Zara had ordered her Science Council to examine the human data device, but the results would not be ready for another day. She tried to focus on normal royal duties, but her mind kept returning to the strange moment when Captain Tom Reed had simply walked away. The Queen sat in her private study, looking out through the massive window at her capital city. Millions of Velthani lived in the gleaming towers that stretched toward the purple sky. Flying vehicles moved between the buildings in organized patterns, carrying people to their daily work. Everything looked peaceful and orderly, exactly as it had for decades. A soft chime announced that someone wanted to enter. Come in, Queen Zara called. Advisor Nim stepped through the door, carrying a data tablet in her hands. Her usually confident expression looked troubled. Your Majesty, I have the preliminary report from the Science Council. Queen Zara turned away from the window. What did they find? Nim hesitated before answering. The human data appears to be accurate, Your Majesty. Our scientists have confirmed the mathematical models and sensor readings. There is indeed a dark matter storm approaching our sector. The Queen felt her stomach grow cold. How long do we have? If the human calculations are correct, the storm will reach our outer colonies in approximately 72 hours, Nim replied quietly. Queen Zara stood up quickly, her chair scraping against the floor. 72 hours. Why did our own sensors not detect this threat? Our scientists believe the storm is moving through a region of space that our sensor networks do not monitor closely. The humans apparently develop specialized detection equipment because their home system is located near an area where such storms are more common. The Queen began pacing back and forth across her study. Her silver hair caught the light from the window as she moved. How bad will it be if the storm hits our unprepared colonies? Nim consulted her tablet. The storm will disrupt all electronic systems that are not properly shielded. Ships caught in open space will lose power and life support. Planetary defense grids will fail. Communication networks will go dark for weeks or even months. And casualties? Without proper preparation, the death toll could reach into the millions, Your Majesty. Queen Zara stopped pacing and stared out the window again. In 3 days, many of those gleaming towers might go dark. Millions of her people could die because she had been too proud to listen to a human captain's warning. Begin immediate evacuation procedures for all outer colonies, she ordered. Contact the military and tell them to prepare emergency shielding for as many ships as possible. Yes, Your Majesty. But there is another problem. Queen Zara turned to look at her advisor. What now? We do not have enough ships to evacuate everyone in time. Our transportation network was designed for normal commerce and travel, not emergency evacuation of entire star systems. The Queen felt a sick sensation in her stomach. How many people can we save? Perhaps 60% of the population in the affected areas, if we start immediately and work without stopping. Queen Zara closed her eyes and tried to think. 40% of several million people would still mean hundreds of thousands of deaths. All because she had chosen to mock a human captain instead of listening to his warning. Your Majesty, Nim said carefully, there may be one option. Tell me. The human captain gave us complete technical specifications for their dark matter shielding technology. Our engineers believe they can adapt it to work with our systems, but it would take several days to install on our ships. Queen Zara opened her eyes. Several days? The storm arrives in 3 days. Yes, Your Majesty. We would need help from people who already understand the technology. The Queen understood immediately. You mean we need help from the humans? Captain Reed's ship left our space yesterday morning, but our long-range sensors show it has not yet reached the jump point to leave this sector. We could still contact them. Queen Zara walked to her desk and sat down heavily in her chair. The irony was too bitter to ignore. The same humans she had insulted and dismissed were now her people's only hope for survival. Send a priority message to Captain Reed, she said quietly. Tell him that Queen Zara of the Velthani Empire requests his immediate assistance with the approaching dark matter storm. Nim nodded and began typing on her tablet. After a few moments, she looked up. The message has been sent, Your Majesty. What should we do while we wait for his response? Begin evacuation procedures immediately. If Captain Reed refuses to help us, we will save as many people as we can with our own resources. And if he agrees to help? Queen Zara stared down at her hands. Then we will learn whether humans are as forgiving as they are brave. 2 hours later, Nim returned to the Queen's study with news. Your Majesty, we have received a response from Captain Reed. Queen Zara looked up from the reports she had been reading about evacuation progress. What did he say? The message was very short, Your Majesty. He said only, what do you need? The Queen sat back in her chair, surprised. She had expected anger, demands for apologies, or at least some mention of how her court had treated him. Instead, Tom Reed had responded as if the insults had never happened. He wants to know what kind of help we need, Nim continued. Should I send him our technical requirements? Yes, Queen Zara replied. And tell him that we will provide whatever resources or payment he requests. 3 hours after that, Captain Reed's ship returned to Velthani space. But it was not alone. Somehow, in the short time since receiving the Queen's message, Reed had contacted other human vessels in nearby systems. A small fleet of 7 human ships now approached the capital world. Queen Zara stood on the command deck of her orbital defense station, watching the human ships through the main viewing window. They were smaller than Velthani vessels and looked much simpler in design. No flowing curves or decorative elements, just functional shapes built for efficiency and reliability. General Keck stood beside her, studying the approaching ships with professional interest. They move in very tight formation, Your Majesty. Their pilots are clearly experienced. What kind of ships are they? The Queen asked. Mixed types. 2 appear to be cargo vessels, 3 are escort frigates, and 2 look like specialized rescue ships. They came prepared for emergency operations. A communication officer approached them. Your Majesty, Captain Reed is requesting permission to dock with the station. He says he has brought engineering teams and emergency supplies. Grant permission immediately, Queen Zara replied. And prepare the main conference room for a strategy meeting. 30 minutes later, Queen Zara sat at the head of a long table in the station's conference room. Captain Tom Reed sat to her right, along with 6 other human officers from the rescue fleet. On her left sat her own advisors and military commanders. Tom looked exactly the same as he had 3 days earlier. Same simple brown uniform, same calm expression, same steady brown eyes. He showed no signs of anger or resentment about what had happened in the throne room. Captain Reed, Queen Zara began carefully, I want to thank you for returning to help us, especially after how my court treated you. Tom looked at her directly. Your Majesty, people's lives are more important than hurt feelings. We can discuss other matters after everyone is safe. The simple honesty of his response made Queen Zara feel even worse about her earlier behavior. What do you need from us to protect my people? Tom gestured to a woman sitting next to him. This is Commander Sarah Lopez, our chief engineer. She can explain the technical requirements. Commander Lopez activated a small holographic projector that showed a 3-dimensional image of the approaching storm. The dark matter disturbance is larger than our initial estimates suggested. It will affect a much wider area than we first calculated. General Kex leaned forward. How much wider? Instead of just the outer colonies, the storm will also reach your inner systems, including this capital world. Shocked murmurs filled the room. Queen Zara felt her hands go cold. Are you saying that our entire empire is at risk? The capital world should be far enough from the storm center to avoid the worst effects, Commander Lopez replied. But you will still experience power disruptions, communication failures, and atmospheric disturbances. Tom spoke up. We have brought enough shielding equipment to protect your most critical infrastructure. But we will need to work together to install it in time. What about the outer colonies? Asked Chancellor Voss. We have already sent emergency messages to human rescue ships in 3 nearby sectors, Tom answered. Additional vessels should arrive within 18 hours to assist with evacuation operations. Queen Zara stared at Tom in amazement. You called for more ships before we even agreed to let you help. When people are in danger, you don't wait for formal agreements, Tom said simply. You act first and handle the politics later. For the next 12 hours, Queen Zara watched something she had never seen before. Humans and Velthani working together with perfect coordination, despite having been strangers just days earlier. The humans shared their technology freely and patiently explained complex procedures to Velthani engineers who had previously dismissed human science as primitive. Commander Lopez worked directly with Velthani technical teams to install dark matter shielding on critical systems. She never showed frustration when explanations had to be repeated, and she always found simple ways to describe complicated concepts. Captain Reed coordinated with Velthani military officers to organize evacuation schedules for the outer colonies. He listened carefully to their concerns about local conditions and adjusted plans based on their knowledge of the affected areas. The other human officers shared emergency supplies, offered medical assistance, and provided technical support wherever it was needed. None of them mentioned the insults from the throne room, and all of them worked as hard to save Velthani lives as they would to save human lives. Queen Zara spent most of that time on the command deck, monitoring progress and making decisions about resource allocation. But she also spent time watching how the humans interacted with her people. She noticed that Tom Reed never raised his voice, even when coordinating complex operations under extreme time pressure. She saw Commander Lopez patiently teaching a young Velthani engineer how to calibrate shielding equipment, showing the same procedure 5 times until the student understood it perfectly. She watched human crew members sharing their personal food supplies with Velthani workers who had been working too long to take proper meal breaks. The humans ate the same emergency rations they gave to others, and they worked the same exhausting shifts they asked everyone else to work. Most surprisingly, she observed that the humans never seemed to expect gratitude or recognition for their efforts. They simply did what needed to be done, as if helping strangers was the most natural thing in the galaxy. 18 hours after the human ships had arrived, long-range sensors detected the approaching storm. It looked like a massive wall of dark energy moving through space, distorting everything behind it. The storm was even larger than the updated estimates had suggested. "All evacuation ships report ready status," announced the communications officer. "The last civilian transports are leaving the outer colonies now." Queen Zara looked at Tom Reed. "Will they make it to safety in time?" "It will be very close," Tom admitted. "But our escort ships are staying with the civilian transports to provide additional protection if needed." "And the capital world?" Commander Lopez checked her instruments. "Dark matter shielding is active on all critical systems. We should maintain power, communication, and life support throughout the storm." 6 hours later, the storm hit the outer edge of Velthani space. Queen Zara watched through long-range sensors as the dark energy swept through star systems where millions of her people had lived just days before. The evacuated colonies went dark one by one as the storm passed over them. "Status report on the evacuation fleet," she called out. "All civilian ships have reached safe distance," the communications officer replied. "Human escort vessels are maintaining protective formation around the convoy." The storm continued its relentless advance toward the inner systems. As it grew closer, the orbital defense station began experiencing minor power fluctuations despite its shielding. "Storm front will reach the capital world in approximately 2 hours, Commander Lopez announced. Queen Zara turned to Tom Reed. "Captain, I want you to take your ships to a safe distance. You have already done more than we could have asked." Tom shook his head. "We stay until everyone is safe, Your Majesty. That's how humans do things. But your own ships could be damaged or destroyed." "Then we'll rebuild them," Tom replied calmly. "Ships can be replaced. People cannot." When the dark matter storm finally reached the capital world, Queen Zara was standing on the command deck next to Tom Reed. Through the viewing window, they could see strange aurora patterns dancing across the planet's atmosphere as dark energy interacted with the magnetic field. The station shook slightly as the storm passed around them, but the lights stayed on and the life support systems continued functioning normally. The human shielding technology worked exactly as promised. "All systems holding steady," Commander Lopez reported. "The shielding is performing better than expected." For 3 hours, the storm raged around them. Communication with the surface was interrupted several times, but emergency systems maintained basic operations throughout the capital city. The carefully planned preparations had saved millions of lives. When the storm finally passed, Queen Zara looked out at her world and saw the lights of her cities still glowing in the darkness. Her people were safe, thanks to the humans she had mocked and dismissed just days earlier. "Damage assessment coming in from all systems," the communications officer announced. "Preliminary reports show minimal casualties and infrastructure damage throughout the Empire." Queen Zara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, she looked at Tom Reed with an expression of deep gratitude mixed with shame. "Captain Reed," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology that I do not know how to make." Tom studied her face for a moment, just as he had done in the throne room 3 days earlier. But this time, his expression was gentle rather than neutral. "Your Majesty," he said, "the best apology is learning something from the experience." "What should I learn?" That being young or new or different does not make someone wrong. That pride can be more dangerous than any storm. And that the measure of a leader is not how they handle praise, but how they handle being told they might be mistaken. Queen Zara nodded slowly. Will you accept my formal apology to your people for the treatment you received in my court? On one condition, Tom replied. The queen looked surprised. What condition? That you remember this feeling the next time someone comes to you with information you don't want to hear. For the first time since the crisis began, Queen Zara smiled. It was a small, sad smile, but it was genuine. I will remember, Captain Reed. I promise you that. As the human ships prepared to leave Velthani space, Queen Zara stood once again in her crystal throne room. But this time, she was not sitting on her throne. Instead, she stood at the center of the vast room, holding a formal treaty document. Tom Reed stood before her, along with his officers. Behind them stood hundreds of Velthani courtiers, but the mood was very different from 3 days earlier. Instead of mocking laughter, there was respectful silence and genuine gratitude. By the authority granted to me as Queen of the Velthani Empire, Zara announced in a clear voice that carried throughout the room, I hereby establish a formal alliance with the human species. Our peoples will share scientific knowledge, provide mutual defense assistance, and offer aid to each other in times of crisis. She handed the treaty document to Tom Reed. This agreement is my personal commitment that the Velthani Empire will never again ignore wisdom simply because it comes from an unexpected source. Tom accepted the treaty with a formal bow. The human species accepts this alliance with honor, Your Majesty. We look forward to learning from your people, just as we hope you will learn from ours. As the ceremony concluded and the humans prepared to leave, Queen Zara walked with Tom toward the exit doors. The same doors he had walked through in silence just 3 days earlier. Captain Reed, she said quietly, may I ask you something personal? Of course, Your Majesty. Why did you come back to help us? After how we treated you, you had every right to leave us to face the storm alone. Tom stopped walking and looked at her directly. Your Majesty, in human culture, we have a saying, actions reveal character, but how you treat those who cannot help you reveals your soul. I don't understand. You insulted me in front of your court because you thought I was weak and my people were primitive. But when the storm came and your people were in danger, none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that people needed help, and we had the ability to provide it. Tom smiled slightly. Humans judge others by their actions, not their words. Your actions when the crisis came showed us that you truly care about your people's welfare. That's the kind of leader we can work with. Queen Zara felt tears forming in her silver eyes. But I was so cruel to you. You were young and proud and afraid of appearing weak in front of your court, Tom replied gently. Those are not permanent character flaws, Your Majesty. They are problems that can be fixed with experience and wisdom. He paused and looked around the magnificent throne room. Besides, your people needed help, and we had the power to provide it. Humans don't abandon people in crisis because their leaders hurt our feelings. As Tom Reed and his crew departed for the final time, Queen Zara stood at her throne room window and watched their ships disappear into the star-filled darkness. She had learned something important about leadership, about pride, and about the difference between appearing strong and actually being strong. But most importantly, she had learned something about humanity that would change how the Velthani Empire interacted with other species forever. She had learned that true strength was not the power to destroy your enemies, but the wisdom to help them even when they did not deserve it. The young queen smiled and turned away from the window. She had work to do, rebuilding the damaged colonies and preparing for future challenges. But now she would face those challenges with new allies who had taught her that the greatest victories were won not through force or intimidation, but through quiet dignity and the willingness to do what was right, regardless of the cost.